So we have as Nitika was saying, like we have an unbelievable panel today. We are very honored to have Raghu, Sunder, and Louis here to share some of their experiences with how they became either a native cloud platform company or someone like Louis, who's working for Sabre, which was a traditional application-driven organization that has become a platform, as well as they are a big consumer of the platform technologies as well. And we also are fortunate to have Sunder, who's part of the persistent systems, where they help multitude of companies from various industries in building next generation technologies, and especially in the last few years, helping many companies in their platform strategy. So we couldn't have asked for a better panel than this to understand the experiences and also to learn from what we should do, and more importantly, what we should not do as well. So just as a prelude to this, the panel, we always, since the morning, we've been talking about platforms. I mean, like, how every organization used to be, had to be a software company, then every organization ended up being a digital company. Now every organization is becoming a platform company, right? So we went ahead and studied what does platform companies mean. And in our analysis, we found that there are about 8 kinds of platform organizations today, right? Looks like we're running late on the slides, but anyway. So it's not like when we talk about platforms, there is one kind of platforms, right? There are literally like about 8 different kinds of platforms, as you can see here, whether they are the technology platforms, whether they are the AI platforms, whether the utility platforms. So there are about 8 different kinds of platforms. But as we've been talking since the morning, whether it's a keynote from Pari or Amit or Ram, everybody is talking about the biggest ingredient of the success of any platform company is having the right people in the right roles, right? So that means that, yes, if you are building it grounds up, you have all the advantage of going and finding those people. I'm not saying that that is easy, but especially for the organizations that have gone through this transformation, there is a lot more work that they have to do to ensure that they have the relevant talent working on this. So we'll be talking more about those experiences today. So let me start off with Raghu, you coming from VMware, which is like almost like a digital native for platforms. What does workforce transformation for you mean?
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to have a platform technology right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And for the better part of our existence, we have been a platform company. For us, workforce transformation was more about as we moved our products and our business models from perpetual business models, software business models, to native cloud business models. And that has been a pretty significant transition. We are not done yet, but that was the significant case of workforce transformation for us.
Sure.
And like it shares the characteristics of many other types of transformation that you alluded to. It's from the people, from the business strategy to what defines your new ecosystem now, and how do you prosecute against that.
Okay.
So it's a multi-dimensional puzzle, if you will.
Okay, perfect. And Sundar, you have a different vantage point of view, right? I mean, like you work with multiple companies with different maturity levels, different product lifecycle timelines. How do you see it? I mean, like, from the workforce transformation perspective.
So there's a workforce issue, but as I see it, it's less of a transformation issue. It's more of an evolution. And the way we look at our company, for probably the first 25 years of the company, we were helping companies build their products and platforms. And now you just alluded to it. Everybody is trying to become a product company, software company, and a platform company. And so we are now helping healthcare organizations, finance organizations build products and platforms. There's a nuance that's very different. First we were talking to technologists who knew technology, and we were bringing capabilities to build. Sorry. Okay. And now we're talking to business leaders and businesses where technology is not their primary strength. And so it's more about taking a workforce and making ourselves, I see ourselves as a platform of talent for our customers.
Okay.
And that's the way I look at it. It's less about transformation. It's about making the workforce more market aware and market relevant.
The evolution. It's not like a transformation, but more of an evolution. Right. I have a different question for you. Like, when you, why should platform companies even think about workforce transformation? Like, why, is that an important topic, or is it like because we don't find the people, we kind of make it as a very important topic?
It's a critically important topic. If you're a company that is an enterprise that is using a platform that didn't used to use a platform, so in our case, we started in American Airlines. We were just building an application that then spun out from American Airlines, and we had to make it usable to many different airlines. To now we've evolved into having a solution that is not just for airlines, it's for travel agencies, it's for hotels, etc. And through that transformation, we've had to realize that the technology build is not the only piece of it. We now need to understand, where do we innovate? Okay. And the people that need to innovate, what do they need to understand? And it's not just about technology. They need to deeply understand the business that we're in, and the business that we need to achieve, and what our customers see the advantage of. So they need to be able to separate that and level up their business skills and become technical business contributors as well.
Got it. So what are some of the models that you have employed? I mean, like, you guys have gone through this big transformation in the last, 15 years?
That's double that.
Double that, okay. There you go. So what are some of the key learnings that you have found?
I think we've learned that you have to be flexible.
Okay.
We have to be prepared to be bold. We have to be prepared to take risks. And we have to be prepared to think out of the box and do some different things. And it would have been very easy just to kind of coast along. So we've gone and looked at building technology services in different locations.
Sure.
We've looked at closing down offices, opening up new offices, trying out new technologies. We've really pushed our employees to think differently.
Sure.
To the extent where we want them to be uncomfortable. To the extent where we've said, and if I can use an analogy, as I coached my son's soccer team for 14 seasons, I would say to him, and I would say to the team, I want you to be really pushing it out there today. Really go for it. I want you to get a yellow card. And
not a red card.
Not a red card. A red card means you're out the game. But a yellow card. And a yellow card is like a caution. But that's how I want to describe, and I congratulate them for it. That's how I describe the level of uncomfort. And in business, I want people to put it out there, take a risk to the point where they know what the limit of discomfort is. And I can tell you, with my boss as the CEO, I frequently get yellow cards, but I found out what is the limit, how much can I push it, and how much can I go to the edge. So in our transformation of the workforce, I want my staff to push the limits of what did they used to do, and what are you going to do differently to be able to operate in this new environment and this new paradigm that we have to work in.
Perfect. Raghu, going back to you, VMware has evolved, as you said, in multiple business, from the business transformation perspective as well. So what are the roles of the skills that are very critical for you in your experience when you became like a true traditional platform company that you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some commonalities across whatever business you're in. And there are some unique things as a platform company. As a platform company, to piggyback on something that Louis said, you have to have a very strong outside-in mindset, right?
Okay.
And that extends to your developers as well.
Okay.
It's not just your product managers or your execs. Secondly, the definition of a platform is three things, in my view. One, it's the fact that it is a utility that is always present, so the entire world can build on it, and not assume one thing or the other. The second is the economics are very favorable to them to participate. In the early days of VMware, we used to say for every dollar VMware makes, the partner ecosystem makes 11 or 12. I think it's probably higher now, but
sure.
But that is the kind of economic benefit that you want, right? And third is you got to have the service mindset. both from an English, as a user, an English word and as a technical word. Right?
Sure.
So you got to have the API mindset, and you got to have a developer-centric organization that can go take that out into the customers, co-create with the customers, right? So those are mindsets that more than organizational constructs that everybody in your team needs to have if you're going to be a platform company.
That has a lot of cultural components, right? Like evolution or changes that you need. How did you do that? Is there any
you
best
hire
practices?
For it. Number one, you hire for it.
Okay.
Right. And secondly, the way you construct a platform organization, you got to layer those things carefully.
Okay.
Right. Who does what?
Sure.
And thirdly, the way you measure them
Mm-hmm.
has a great bearing in it. The things that you champion and support and celebrate as your accomplishments, those things have a bearing in it. So it's not any one single thing.
Got it. Sunder, you have that complexity is multiplied by number of clients, right?
Right.
So how do you handle those changes?
So it eventually comes down to, I'm going to use an analogy. Think of it as you're an Uber driver in Tracy or Sacramento, and you can probably be so good.
Yeah.
But if you know, and if Uber sends enough information to the drivers to say that show up in San Francisco, and you will get a lot more rides and a lot more value out of it. And that's really what the services business model is.
Okay.
It's about taking talent and moving them, directing them. It's to some extent directed by the company and to some extent directed by the individual in picking up those opportunities and evolving themselves to be relevant to where the talent demands are.
Sure.
I was interested in hearing probably Gigster, which was on the previous panel, is taking it to one further level in taking it to a crowdsourced model, which is, it's not a corporate driven, but completely user driven. And I think the bigger challenge, as I see it, and as all of us talk about it, we talk about reskilling, we talk about transformation, is the shortage of talent is not going to be solved just by the reskilling.
Got it.
Uber's not going to be able to meet all of our demands if they didn't have active marketing to bring more drivers into the network. And there is a very important role in bringing new talent and making them capable of evolution. And I think that's where the services industry probably has innovated the most over time, is creating talent pools out of capabilities that did not exist. And that's, I think, where a services viewpoint to transformation will be different from, say, if you were a product company or a platform company.
How do you do that? Give us a few examples of how you would, not only about reskilling, but also identifying where my clients are going to go forward. Is there a method to that madness?
So today, most companies are looking at their proxy of the customers we serve at Persistent because it's largely new technology build. We see a certain viewpoint. If you're a service provider working more on the operations management, you would see and we're looking at patterns of where the talent demands are, how the teams form, and it's not a single skill set. There's probably a lot of obsession up today about AI and ML, but that AI ML engineer also needs a project manager, also needs a business analyst, and no humans. There would be a few superstars who can do it all, but eventually it's come about building teams. And that's where it's not just sending one Uber driver, it's about sending a fleet.
Sure.
And so it's not algorithmic today.
Okay.
It's still very much anecdotal. It's still looking at data, looking at patterns, looking at immediate demand, and being able to reskill. And one of the things that services companies have done, which the larger tech companies also do very well, is building the internal training infrastructure. Some of the world's largest corporate universities sit inside services companies, and that in itself is a core capability in a services business model.
I'm you don't have the luxury of creating that kind of a bench or having people to, spend time to kind of reskill and everything, right? But you have gone through this transformation, right? What are some specific roles or skills or capabilities that you look for compared to where you were 15, 10 years ago?
So I think we look for people who are open-minded, who are flexible, and who are willing to go through a transformation. So that's not an ageist thing, it's not a millennial thing, although I will say that if you look at the millennial workforce, they are eager, enthusiastic, and have worked and grown up in a platform world or even early versions of a platform world.
Sure.
But aside from that, I'd say that anybody can actually go through it. And the way that we lead through it is we expect that the senior folks in the room are the ones who are going to go out and spend time with the individuals and talk to the individuals, talk to the teams, and understand if they can actually manage the transition, go through the transition. And I can give you an example from my world. So it was back in the Oracle days when we were actually starting up Oracle in Hyderabad in 1996, I think it was, and I was working with Chandrababu Naidu on that. And we had to think, how can we think differently about building that Oracle center there versus the one that we built in Bangalore some 5 years prior to it. And it required us to ask the employees down in Bangalore, who's willing to step up, who's willing to move to Hyderabad, who's willing to operate and work differently in this new world, who's here in Redwood Shores that will go over there and seed the team over in Hyderabad. Will they be involved, and involved to the extent where this becomes their life? And funnily enough, when I was there, I was doing it enough that I used to land there, and I was there so frequently that I would text when I got there to say to my kids, hey, I've landed, I'm here, I'm safe in India now. And they'd say, well, say hello to your Indian family because you're there so frequently. And I think that's the key to going through any of these transformations.
Is the leadership involvement.
The leadership involvement, and you have to be there, and you have to be hands-on. And with that, and open-mindedness, and the willingness for the organization to take a risk, you can go through it. That risk needs to be both from an individual, I'm making myself vulnerable, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm willing to say that.
Sure.
But I get support from the leadership because the leadership's there with me.
So I mean, like, the open-mindedness and flexibility, right? I mean, like, that is like a cultural trait of an individual, like almost at an individual level. And people, when they have been in the company working on certain things in a certain processes, asking them to change over a period of time, how viable is it, and what have you guys done to go through that change management?
Well, I beg to differ a little bit. Yes, it is an individual trait, but it's displayed and demonstrated by leadership all the way up through to the CEO. So if the CEO gives permission that I want you to take risks, it's okay to take risks, and in fact to the extent where they will reward and recognize, and I very much have a program in every business I've worked in where on a regular basis I would call people up on the stage and I would give them something because they took a risk, and maybe the risk didn't play out.
Sure.
Maybe it failed. But you know what? Failure is okay. So to transition through this change, you have to be able to say that you're going to take the risk, and it doesn't mean you're going to get fired over it or your bonus is going to get canceled. Now, there's being totally belligerent and careless versus an educated risk. But so the organization will encourage that. And I think most people will take that on board. Those that are unable to change and shift, so yes, there will be some attrition through that cycle, and you bring in some new younger blood along the way. And it's the merger of the two.
Got it. Raghu, going back to your thoughts about the transformation and everything, I mean, like, this is not the first time even a relatively young company like VMware has seen the transformation. Like 10 years ago, everybody said all the enterprises are going to be software driven, and like 5 years ago, everybody said that every enterprise is digital, and now everybody's saying that every enterprise is platform, right? So you have seen enough transformations. Why is this any different than what you have seen in the past?
The change attributes, some of which I think Louis mentioned, are common, right? But let's not get carried away. Companies want to be platforms, but I don't think many of them are in a position to be platforms, right? There's a lot of platform envy and platform washing going on.
Can you explain on that one, platform envy?
Well, I mean, the companies with the best market capitalizations, the largest ones, are the ones that are most valuable, are all platform companies.
Right.
So everybody looks at that and say, can I become a platform company?
Sure.
And you got to be in a business where you are the key orchestrator of a set of outcomes for a large set of people, right? And you got to have either a two-sided marketplace available to you, or if it is a one-sided marketplace, you got to have the right economic models available to you, right?
Sure.
But I think back to your transformation question, I think the people side is, I would say, 1/3 of the issue. Right? 2/3 of the issue is the business model and the leadership transformation.
Okay.
Too often what you see is people not committed to a transformation.
Okay.
And either because of external pressures or internal pressures or impatience or what have you, right? I think the worst thing that you can do is you could take your employee teams through a transformation and then shift again.
Okay.
Or take them through a transformation but do not give them a supporting environment that allows them to execute the transformation, either in terms of permission to fail or compensation systems and so on and so forth, but also equally critically in terms of tools that they have to execute their jobs every day.
Yeah.
While VMware, we obviously have our own transformation. Our nature of our business is we talk to companies to help them become software companies.
Sure.
Or help them transform their computing environments for the millennial workplace or a more diverse workplace. And the tools that we supply allows us to have a frontline seat into how these guys are going about it.
Okay.
And very often they get fixated on the failure cases, or when they are fixated purely on one dimension but do not think about it holistically.
So do you see them more in the enterprises, or do you see them in the large enterprises? Is there how you look at the resistance to that change happening in your customers?
The risk factors are higher in large enterprises because there's diversity of agendas. And smaller organizations are in very strong CEO-driven organizations. There tends to be lesser agendas.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the nature of these businesses.
Sure.
And larger businesses also do not have long time frames by which they measure these outcomes. They are particularly disciplined about certain outcomes that they measure over longer times.
Okay.
But for these kind of outcomes, they do not give themselves enough time.
Okay.
So these tends to be riskier in larger companies.
So do you get involved in the workforce transformation of your clients who are leveraging your platforms to build a platform business?
Yep.
Right? And what is the typical advice do you give them?
So we get engaged in two ways. One is because we supply cloud software, or we operate cloud software, there are a lot of companies that come to us and say, we want to be a software organization.
Okay.
We are a bank today, but we really think of ourselves as a software organization that wants to do banking, or a automotive software company that does automotive, et cetera, et cetera. You can name your retail company, et cetera. And there we get to work with people that call themselves chief digital officers in their organizations, as well as traditional CIO organization.
Yeah.
And the failure modes there is very often the business model. Do they have a business model that's allowed them to be a software company, number one?
Okay.
Right? And is that business model getting the right priority or the right trade-off against their traditional business model?
Sure.
And those kind of things tend to be the one failure mode. The second failure mode tends to be, have you changed your process and tools to operate that way?
Okay.
And that's the area that we get the most input into. The other aspect of digital transformation is how do regular employees work in enterprises today? And something as simple as people coming in with a variety of different devices to a variety of expectations for consumer-like user experiences.
Yeah.
And we have software that helps them solve those problems. But there, the training is one of end-user training, and the transformation is one of end-user transformation. So.
Got it. A question for you, Sunder. Because you are working, same question, but from a different perspective. How do you influence your customers? Like in your case, is not just deploying the thing, right? You are actually building it, co-building it in many cases. So how do you influence some of the changes in the workforce in your client organizations? Not only your organization, but also your client organization. Do you get involved in it?
We do, and quite often the way to go about it is, and I don't think it's changed in the last 15, 20 years of services or consulting, even a lot of what you do. If you see a project and you see a critical need on the customer side for a project, that's a role that is missing, which is causing risk and a likelihood of a project or an initiative to fail, you're going to call it out and say, either we help you find someone, you find someone, but if you don't have someone doing X, that's going to fail. So it comes down to block and tackle, and you do that when you put a proposal together and identify critical risks and critical success factors, you're effectively influencing that. So it's when you're in a high-touch services business model, these interactions effectively, it is a very consultative engagement, and in that the influence of the clients, what it takes from a workforce perspective to make an initiative successful just happens naturally.
Got it. So in the interest of time, I want to see, I know we have a lot of other questions, but want to see if there are any questions from the audience. Yeah, sorry.
So one question I have is, how do you manage the change with the middle management team? But that's, again, it's a bigger concern. It's easier for the lower level engineers to do it, but at mid-level, how do you drive change? Raghu, you can.
Yeah, and that is in fact most places where new ideas go to die, right? Not because middle managers inherently are programmed that way, but it is a combination of three factors, in my opinion. One is the clarity of purpose. The middle managers are the ones that are juggling 3 or 4 or 5 balls in the air at the same time. And you're either throwing this as the 6th one, or if it's one of these 5 ones, you do not tell them what they're allowed to drop, right? So it's the clarity of communication and purpose. And secondly, helping them, supporting them in the second order effects of that. So if a middle manager in this function does X, it often means somebody else in some other function has to do Y. And they cannot by alone affect that change by virtue of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So it is to be able to help them orchestrate that change across, right? And thirdly, allowing them to take the risks and support the failure modes there. So I would say those are the 3 things you got to do.
And if I can add to that, I agree with what Raghu says, but then it's very situational and depends on the particular organization. But something else you could do is bifurcate the organization. So I've been in situations where part of the company continues to exist in the way that it needs to, and some folks may consider that the cash cow. The money needs to still come in, we got to keep the lights on. But there's some other part of the organization that is going to operate and work in the new way with the new skills. And if you can manage that transition well, there'll come a point where the old way will be attracted and pulled like a magnet to the new way because they want to be the future. They don't want to work on or operate in the old way. So that's another way of doing it. But it is situational. It depends what opportunities you have in front of you.
Absolutely.
So
Sunder, you have to add anything?
I'll probably go back to what you described in the morning as a microservices model for organization structure. The question that you're asking almost assumes that top-down traditional hierarchical structures. Some of us have that challenge, but Born Digital or recently born companies, there are many bottom-up, innovation-driven at the edges, where middle management is less of a problem, is more of a... So I think the assumption that we need to get middle management to change is only applicable to a small part of the universe. There's enough of a universe, like the classical consulting partnership model, the middle management kind of is actually the glue. It's not top-down. So I think we need to look at it from a slightly unconventional view or a universal view, not just a traditional view here.
Okay. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm not able to see. Okay, just segueing into a similar topic, but different. If you one is the a lot more we talked about is the softer skills, right? Let's talk about the hard skills perspective, right? I mean, like the amount of transformation that is happening and the disruption that is happening in the industry is just, every year we say that we haven't seen so much disruption in technologies or tools as we have seen in the last 10 years, and that's been constantly the comment that we keep hearing. When that level of disruption happens and that level of knowledge enhancement that you need to do to the people, how do you handle that? We'll start with you, Luis.
I think it's 2 parallel paths. One, you have to offer the opportunity to your employee base to retrain.
Okay.
So training classes, education, support time for them to actually come up to speed. But you know what? You're running a business and there's requirements for shareholders and stakeholders, etc. So I think that's when you start to look at third-party skills.
Okay.
And look outside and see if you can bring some of those in. One reason because they have knowledge and they can share that knowledge and put processes in place. The other piece is, it can make maybe the middle managers or whoever it might be a little uncomfortable.
Okay. Yeah.
And that will maybe motivate and incent. But I think you, from a leadership point of view, have to have balls in both camps.
Sure.
So you can mitigate the risk and go either way.
Okay. Raghu, anything to share on that one?
Yeah, I
In
think
terms-
you got to institutionalize learning. I
Okay.
think there is systematic ways of doing that. That's
Okay.
one. And I would say when these kind of changes are needed,
Uh-huh.
leadership voice is the most critical thing.
Okay.
And I would say almost, it's not just the CEO or the person at the top,
Sure.
but across the board.
Across the board.
So-
And today, if you look at it, what skills or roles are, from your perspective, the most critical for you to become a true platform company?
A platform fundamentally is a business proposition
Right.
more than a technology proposition. And I would say it's those skills that are the most important thing.
Business skills are more important than the hard skills, hard
And,
technology skills.
Yeah, and I don't mean for conventional business skills like selling or whatever, right? It is understanding what the implications of being a platform business are.
Right.
That's not truly well understood by companies that want to become platforms.
Got it. Got it. So there, for you, I'm like, what are the skills or the technologies that are becoming a lot more prominent today than they were before?
In terms of demand, it's actually everything downstream on the build and engineering side.
Okay.
But if I kind of think about it for ourselves and even from, say, our customers, I think it's design. And I'm going to point this back to you, saying Zinnov's a consulting advisory firm. You're building a platform with Drop that you demoed.
That's right.
When you're thinking about Drop, what's the skill that's most important? Is it building Drop, or is it visioning what Drop should do for your customer?
Actually, visioning what you want to do for the customers on one side, which actually the skill we had. The skills that we did not have is how to do it, but we were lucky because we could build it grounds up.
Yeah.
We don't have to kind of retrain. But some companies don't have that luxury, right?
And then come to us.
Of course. Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I comment
Yeah,
on what
absolutely.
you asked, Raghu? And at the risk of being controversial.
Sure.
So if we're transforming, we're becoming a platform company, using platforms, et cetera, as an enterprise, I could argue that the true value and the true way to differentiate is in transitioning our technologists to be business technologists, if you like, and the technologists at the platform level become commodities. Because the platform is standardized, or platforms that we might use as standardized, people can learn those, I can get those skills here, I can get those there, and I don't want to be too controversial, but those are available in the market, and maybe some are better than others, so okay, that's fine. But where the real differentiation is for the products I deliver are those people at the higher level that can create innovation and product differentiation or service differentiation that truly understand my business and have a technical understanding.
Raghu, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going with this thing. Because a platform business model is fundamentally different than a normal business model.
Business model, yeah.
You got to be willing to live with uneconomic returns for a long time to build an audience.
Yeah.
And have a really long horizon to monetize that audience.
Sure.
Right? Whether it's a product or content. Yeah.
So I'll ask my favorite question, which I always ask in the panels. Like, all of us have more than 20 years of experience or more. But if you look at the talent that is coming into the workforce today, the millennial talent or the next generation talent, how do you deal with them? I mean, like, is that the kind of talent that is helping you to really build these platforms? Are they bringing some advantages? Are they bringing some challenges?
Yeah, I think they bring both.
Okay.
So they're a handful to manage. They're, maybe a little egotistical, entitled perhaps in this world.
Sure.
But they have unbridled enthusiasm and have grown up in a world that is on platforms. We talked about whether the platform was Facebook they grew up on or whatever it might be, or Google or whatever. They have platforms, so they know it there, they expect it there, and they're thinking at a different level of innovation than the traditional non-millennial workforce.
Yeah.
So yeah, they may be hard to manage at times, but you need to have a blend of them in the business to challenge the traditionalists.
Raghu, any comments on that?
I think it's a massive opportunity.
Okay.
Right? And just like you would not build the same consumer product for somebody like you or me versus a teenager, I think you got to think differently when you're thinking about millennials as employees and millennials as customers, and it's not very different.
Okay. Sundar, from your case, like, you said, what, 40% of your talent has less than 3 years of experience. That is like, tremendous amount of, workforce there, right? So,
it is, but it's always been true in any services business, starting with management consulting, McKinsey, to a BPO, to any IT services or product engineering services company, in that it has been about creating talent, which I alluded to. So, and so I would almost kind of disagree that we are making too much noise about the millennial. The 35-year-old millennial with a mortgage and 2 kids is no different than a 35-year-old Gen Xer at that stage in life. But that 22-year-old millennial is perhaps more disruptive than the 22-year-old millennial that Gen Xer that I was. So I think we need to look at it in terms of a company that has been used to dealing with a lot of younger workforce is going to naturally adjust to the generational shifts than a company where the talent pool was not as sharply pyramidized or whatever you call it.
Absolutely. We ran out of time, but I want to ask one final question for all of you. So if there are 2 or 3 things that you want the audience to take away from this discussion, what would that be from your experience?
From Sabre's history, I would say that be prepared to take risks, push hard, be vulnerable, be open, admit what you don't know, push for, I'm going to give you 5, I think, push for training, retraining. That's really critically important. Be prepared and be bold about bringing outside expertise in to challenge the internal. And finally, you'll find a lot of people here who will be pushing for the not invented here, the NIH, and I think you've got to push against that.
Okay, perfect. Sundar?
I'm going to maybe I'll compensate for that and give just one.
Yeah.
I think be more authentic in the employee-employer contract.
Can you just tell what authenticity means?
So don't tell someone you're a cog in a, don't tell someone that you're the most important asset to help build our future and use them as a cog in the wheel. Actually, you're better off telling them you're a cog in the wheel and you're a very important cog in the wheel, because without which the whole business will collapse.
Yeah.
Today we do, across corporate environments, we do a very bad job of that. We're in this whole notion to be corporate correct, the equivalent of political correct. We are not authentic in the employee-employer contract. I think that's the one thing I would go focus on.
Raghu, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, like I was saying before, I think workforce transformation in isolation means nothing, and it's going to be very damaging unless you have a holistic strategy around your business transformation. So I would say that's where you got to start with.
Perfect. So with that, we'll close out the panel. It has been an honor to host you, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and guiding and advising pretty much everybody here, one way or the other, either building or involved in building a platform, business or an organization. So it's been tremendously valuable to learn from your insights. So thank you so much.